All right, we're about to dive into a text that has shaped, well, pretty much everything. History, art, law, you name it. But to really get a handle on it, we have to start with a kind of surprising question. What if the world's most famous book isn't a book at all? I know, that sounds a little crazy, right? But the way most of us picture the Bible, this single giant book with one cover and one ending, that's actually missing the whole point. What's inside that binding is something way more complex and honestly a lot more interesting.
Because here's the thing, the Bible isn't really a single book. It's a library. Think of it as a collection of 66 totally separate works, all written by dozens of different authors from every walk of life. We're talking kings, fishermen, prophets, poets, all across an incredible 1,500 years. Now, just like any good library, this one has sections. And the Bible's first and biggest division is into two main parts, what we call the Old and New Testaments. You know, understanding this first split is the key to navigating the entire collection. And this really breaks it down perfectly. So, you've got the Old Testament, which makes up the first two-thirds of the library with its 39 books. Its main focus? The long, complicated story of the nation of Israel and its relationship with God. Then, you flip to the New Testament. It's got 27 books, and it zooms in on the life and teachings of Jesus and the very beginning of the Christian church. See? Two different collections, but all part of one unified library. Okay, so let's go another layer deep. Just like your local library has sections for history, poetry, and nonfiction, so does the Bible. And this is super important, because you just can't read a poem the same way you read a legal document, right? The Bible's authors used all kinds of different literary styles.
So our library tour kicks off in the law section. These are the first 5 books of the Old Testament. And yeah, they've got those huge foundational stories you've probably heard of, like creation and the Exodus from Egypt, but they also lay out all the detailed legal, moral, and ceremonial rules that were the bedrock of ancient Israel.
Next up, we wander into the history section. And these books, they read just like a national saga. They trace the entire story of the Israelites, from the moment they enter the Promised Land through the rise and fall of their kingdoms, their epic battles, their heroes, and yeah, their tragic defeats in exile too. Now, this next section is where the tone totally shifts. It's really cool. We go from these grand national histories to something deeply personal. The poetry and wisdom books are filled with songs, like in the Psalms, these short, clever sayings and proverbs, and even these profound philosophical arguments about suffering and the meaning of it all, like in the book of Job. Then you get to the prophets. Now, it's really easy to think of these books as just, fortune-telling, but they are so much more than that. The prophets were more like social commentators, speaking truth to power, calling out injustice, and trying to get the people and their kings to return to their core values. And with this section, we cross that bridge into the New Testament. The foundation of this whole new collection is the Gospels. You know them: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They're 4 different biographical accounts of Jesus. Each one tells the same basic story, but from a totally unique perspective, painting this rich, multi-dimensional portrait. And the final section on our little tour is the epistles. The rest of the New Testament is mostly made up of these, and they're exactly what they sound like: letters. They were written by early church leaders like the Apostle Paul to these brand new Christian communities scattered all over the Roman Empire. They're full of practical advice and encouragement, dealing with the real-world problems these small groups were actually facing. So, okay, we have all these different styles: law, history, poetry, letters, written over more than 1,000 years. So the big question is, what holds it all together? Is there a single thread, a single story, that connects this incredibly diverse library? Oh, absolutely. And you can see that story arc right here. It all kicks off with creation. Then it narrows its focus to God's special promise or covenant with the nation of Israel. This leads to the rise and fall of Israel's kingdom. And all through the Old Testament, the story points forward to this central figure, the Messiah, who the Gospels say is Jesus. And his story then launches the final chapter, the beginning of the church, this new global community.
So we get this structure, right? It's a library, it has a plot line, but so what? Why has this specific collection of ancient writings had such a massive, lasting impact on the entire world? Why does it still matter so much today?
Well, its influence is it's almost impossible to measure. So many common phrases we use in English come straight from the Bible. Countless masterpieces of Western art, from Michelangelo's sculptures to the music of Bach, are directly inspired by these stories. And its core teachings, like the 10 Commandments, have become these foundational pillars for legal systems and moral thinking all over the globe.
Which brings us right back to where we started, with a question. When you stop seeing the Bible as one book and start seeing it as this complex, diverse library, full of history, poetry, law, and letters, all telling one big story, it totally changes how you see its impact. The real question isn't just about what's inside it, but how this ancient library of scrolls and letters continues to shape our very modern world.